The fourth principle is the first principle where we start to move outside the prompt itself and more into the wider system. We want to identify how often the prompt gets errors, and we want to rate the responses and test what drives performance. So this isn't specifically a tactic to apply to the prompt, but really a meta tactic for getting better prompts in general. Now, if we look at the text models, we have no evaluation in this case. We're just prompting ChatGPT. This is a simple prompt to get product names that can fit any foot size. Whereas when we're prompt engineering, we have the case. Whereas when we're prompt engineering, we really want to focus on running the prompt multiple times. And we don't just want to run it once. Like I've tested this template hundreds of times just to see how often it fails. And then I've iterated on it since then. So if we look at the prompt template, you can see it's really well optimized and there's nothing superfluous in there. The specific place where you would evaluate quality in ChatGPT is really just to rerun the prompt, say 10 times. Now, I typically evaluate quality when I'm writing code because it's much easier to run it 10, 100 times and then check the responses programmatically. But in this case, you can actually just do it in the ChatGPT interface as well. You can see I've run this 10 times and I can see that it's providing 3 product names every time. It's providing good quality product names. And in the run up to building this template, I tested lots of different combinations of examples, of descriptions, of direction, formatting, and settled upon this as it works the most reliable. Now, you can actually test lots of different things. I talked about reliability. One of the main things is quality. Like, are the names actually any good? Now, in this case, I specified I wanted something in the style of Steve Jobs, and you have Flex Fit and we have iShoe, but OmniStep doesn't have the I in front of it. So I found that sometimes this was like 1 in 10 results. It doesn't include the I at the beginning. And if that's really important to you, then that's something you might want to test for. You can also look at the length. So I have pretty short names here. One of the main things I wanted it to do was to make relatively memorable names, and really long names are not going to be as memorable. We have iShoe, which is great, iFlex, but then we have one example here is Adaptastep iSneakers. It's really got off the rails. And that's something you can test for programmatically. You don't need a human to test these results. You could just actually run a script that says, if the name is longer than a set number of characters, then, we've done a bad job. And you can run the prompt 10 times, 100 times, and see how often it creates one of these long names. The other thing is format. This is particularly important when you're coding because the output of a prompt is typically what you are going to pass on to the next step in the chain. And in this case, it came up with a product description. And that's part of the response. It didn't come up with the names. It actually just came back with this whole description. Innovative and revolutionary. These shoes are designed to adapt to any foot size. It's not what I asked it to do. It's not part of the prompt. And this was an example of what happened before I provided 3 different examples for it to go off. And once you provide more examples, the prompt gets a little bit more reliable and this formatting issue doesn't happen as often. This is something, again, you can test for in code. If you're specifying JSON, you can pass the JSON and check if that passing worked or not before you decide to retry or stop that step. Let's look at image models and how evaluation of quality applies to them. Again, we just have our normal prompts where we're prompting Stable Diffusion. We're trying to find a shoe that can fit any foot size, and the results are all over the map. But the really nice thing about this type of interface is that with image models, quite often evaluation is built into the platform. So on Midjourney, on Stable Diffusion, you get multiple responses back and you can choose which one you like. I would run this multiple times. And then when I find one I like, you can actually grab the seed of that image and apply that in the advanced settings. So it's going to constrain the creativity to just that type of shoe. You can do a lot actually in terms of evaluation, but the evaluation is usually human and manual. It's very hard to program programmatic evaluations or metrics. You typically just have to look at the responses and then click on the ones you like and then save them and then maybe use them as examples later. That's the prompt template if you did want to use that, but you can get similar results to me if you use that template. We can evaluate the quality that you get back. Here I've selected the one that I like, and then I can use that as the base image when I'm generating small variations, because maybe I don't like some aspects of this, like how the lip is pointing up, for example, but I do the rest of the shoe. So if I select that seed image, I could run it again multiple times if I want. But either way, at the end of the day, I'm getting a good idea of what are the options, and then I'm choosing which one is good. Equally, Stable Diffusion are getting some feedback in terms of, here are the 4 that we've generated, and now the user has decided to download that one, or they've decided to upscale that one to a higher resolution. So that means that of these 4, the model did a good job with the one in the bottom. So that helps them improve the quality of their models too. Now, you can test different parameters with image models, and that's where I see a lot of experimentation. There's something called the CFG scale, the classifier free guidance. In Stable Diffusion in the Dream Studio, they call it prompt strength. This is how much does the model follow your prompt versus being creative in itself. You can see the impact of this. What I like to do is create an image grid where I'm changing the parameter, and I can see visually the difference between them. So you can see with CFG scale 3, which is low, and then we're getting this kind of weird looking image. It's not as good. It's not really following the prompt. And then when we dial up the CFG scale, we're getting much better results. And testing where in those parameters the sweet spot is really a big key for image generation.